With the American test of the atomic bomb in 1945, the nuclear race had begun. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its own atomic bomb, but America had already started development on a much more dangerous weapon, the hydrogen bomb. During their nuclear project, America encountered Soviet spies who had been giving the Soviet Union nuclear secrets in order to aid the Soviets' exploration into thermonuclear weapons. In exchange for both countries developing these deadly weapons, the world was significantly influenced. In February of 1945, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin met at Yalta. Their objective to make vital decisions concerning the rest of World War II and to discuss the post-war borders of European countries. Stalin decided to enter the war against Japan if the Soviets were given influence in Manchuria. The agreement was seen by many as proof that wartime collaboration would carry over into the post-war world, but unresolved issues caused the need for another conference. The tensions that arose from this conference began an era of apprehension between the two nations, known as the Cold War. The Cold War was the relationship between America and the Soviet Union from 1945 to 1991, where neither side fought the other directly. America worked to stop the spread of the Soviets' communist ideals and promote capitalism. The Soviets tried to spread communism, a political theory where all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. In the summer of 1945, after the surrender of Germany, the three leaders met again at Potsdam. The United States and the Soviets disagreed where borders should be reconstructed for Germany, Poland, and the Soviet Union, which led to continued tensions. Even furthering tensions was the conversation on July 24th when Truman informed Stalin that the U.S. possessed a new weapon of unusual destructive force. The bomb had been a plutonium implosion bomb which was tested at the Trinity test site in Alamogordo, New Mexico. The U.S.'s test marked the beginning of a new age of nuclear weaponry, which was capable of destroying all human life. On August 6, 1945, the U.S. became the first country to use a nuclear weapon militaristically. The devastation at Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan would not only end the war in the Pacific, but also show the world that the U.S. and its weapons were to be feared. Japan formally surrendered on September 2, 1945, but other countries would not be as submissive in response to America's nuclear capabilities. The Soviet Union's State Defense Council had begun research into nuclear weapons with Lavrenti Beria as leader of the program 2 years earlier in 1943, due to fear that the Nazis would develop a nuclear bomb. On August 29, 1949, 4 years after the first U.S. atomic test, the Soviet Union successfully tested First Lightning, their first atomic bomb, ending the American nuclear monopoly years earlier than the U.S. had expected. Due to the Soviets' achievement of nuclear equality, a military doctrine known as Mutually Assured Destruction, or MAD, emerged. Neither superpower would use their weapons because of the certainty of a counterattack. In January of 1950, in response to the test, Truman announced that the U.S. would officially begin development of the hydrogen bomb, stating, "Whatever agonies may be involved in building this weapon, there would be worse agonies if the Russians got it and we didn't have it." Since the beginning of the American nuclear program, the Soviet Union had set up a network of spies at the Los Alamos laboratories on the Manhattan Project. The United States encountered the use of the Soviets' espionage through the Venona Project. Venona was a top-secret U.S. effort to gather and decrypt messages sent from the Soviet spies working in the U.S. to the Soviet Military Intelligence Agency. The first message decoded implicated Klaus Fuchs, a German scientist working on the Manhattan Project. Fuchs had passed critical thermonuclear cross-section data to Harry Gold, who then relayed it to the Soviet Union during the U.S. nuclear bomb exploration. Fuchs's arrest in 1950 set off a chain reaction of espionage accusations, which led to Julius and Ethel Rosenberg's arrest for espionage activities and their execution in 1953. The spies provided the Soviet Union with needed information on the designs of the atomic bomb, and details on the hydrogen bomb expedited their nuclear project. The Soviets' project was located 250 miles east of Moscow at a secret weapons laboratory called Arzamas. The scientists working on the project, Andrei Sakharov, Vitaly Ginzburg, and Viktor Davydenko, investigated design structures for the hydrogen bomb under the direction of lead scientist Igor Tamm. Sakharov's original idea was known as the layer cake or sloika design. The bomb used the layering of fusionable materials and fission fuel to create a reaction. By the end of January 1950, Beria gave the final authorization to begin production of the layer cake design, and by June of 1952, the bomb was set to be tested. In the meantime, the U.S. had developed the first true H-bomb. On the Alugilab Island in the Marshall Islands on November 1, 1952, the U.S. carried out the Ivy Mike test, the first detonation of a thermonuclear bomb. The bomb was based off the Teller-Ulam principle of stage radiation implosion. In the bomb, an initial fission reaction generated the high temperatures needed to trigger a secondary fusion reaction. After Beria had received word that the American hydrogen bomb had not been a layer cake design, he postponed the test of the layer cake bomb for the summer of 1953. The test experienced more problems after the unexpected death of Stalin in March 1953, before the tests had occurred. Due to political upheaval, the project was halted, many of the project leaders were demoted, and the project began to look orphaned. When Stalin's successor, Orgei Malenkov, gained power, he was informed of the project and gave approval for the upcoming test in August of 1953. Within a few months, Nikita Khrushchev took power and had Beria executed due to his previous positions of power. On August 12th, at the Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan, the Soviets finally tested the RDS-6S or Jo-4, though they knew their design was flawed. The layer cake design in the Jo-4 only allowed it to produce 4% of Ivy Mike's yield, making the bomb virtually useless. The greatest advantage of the Soviets' bomb was that it was small enough to be carried in a plane, unlike the American H-bomb. The Soviet scientists worked to develop a new functional design and finally succeeded in 1954 when Sakharov discovered the concept of radiation implosion. About a year later, on November 22, 1955, the Soviet Union dropped their first true hydrogen bomb, which used Sakharov's two-stage radiation implosion concept. The test, called the RDS-37 test, ended the American monopoly on the hydrogen bomb. The RDS-37 test was conducted at Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan and was the first hydrogen bomb test where the bomb was dropped from a plane. Both countries continued to test their weapons until August 22, 1958, when President Eisenhower called for a temporary prohibition on nuclear weapons testing to begin on October 31st. Khrushchev agreed, and the Soviet Union did not test any nuclear weapons for the next 3 years until September 1, 1961. Within the following 60 days, the Soviet Union conducted 50 atmospheric tests that had a total yield exceeding that of all previous test series by all other nations combined. On October 30, 1961, Tsar Bomba was tested by the Soviet Union at Mytyshika Bay Test Range in the Arctic Sea. The bomb's three-stage radiation implosion design caused the resulting thermonuclear explosion to be the largest in history. This event concerned the US because the Soviet Union had improved their previous hydrogen bomb design. In exchange for the US and Soviet Union developing nuclear weapons, the world was politically and socially influenced. In the United States, citizens began to prepare for a nuclear war, though many opposed nuclear development from the beginning of the project. Paranoia caused public bomb shelters or fallout shelters to be constructed. Some Americans built their own private bomb shelters and stocked them full of supplies. Schools practiced bomb drills, which taught children how to survive a nuclear explosion, and educational videos warned children of the dangers of a nuclear blast. The Soviet development of the bomb led to the US and Soviet Union making treaties to limit each other's abilities to test and make the bombs. The Limited Test Ban Treaty of 1963 banned the testing of nuclear weapons in the ocean, atmosphere, underground, or outside of their territory, and the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons of 1970 de-escalated the nuclear arms race by stating that each country would agree to general or complete disarmament of its nuclear weapons. Each country also agreed to not help other countries develop or acquire nuclear weapons. Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT negotiations, between the United States and Soviet Union were aimed at restricting the production of strategic missiles capable of carrying nuclear weapons. The first agreements, known as SALT I and SALT II, were signed by the United States and the Soviets in 1972 and 1979. These agreements and treaties de-escalated the arms race and the Cold War. The Cold War finally came to an end in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The end to most nuclear testing was a result of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1996, which was signed by China, France, the UK, Russia, and the United States. The treaty banned all nuclear and thermonuclear tests by the nations. However, after realizing from the Soviet Union's example that in order to become and stay a dominant power, a country must be able to compete militaristically with other world powers, many countries began to develop nuclear weapons. By the 2000s, 9 countries had developed nuclear weapons, which meant that even though the exclusive nuclear contest between the Soviet Union and US was over, nuclear weapons development was far from over. The events of World War II led to tensions between two superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union. Both countries were fighting for dominance in the form of a dangerous nuclear arms race. The United States encountered Soviet spies who had given the Soviet Union nuclear secrets, which assisted them in their exploration of the hydrogen bomb. In exchange for creating the bomb, the world was politically and socially influenced. By developing the hydrogen bomb, the Soviets created a more tense and perilous world.